This is the Stevens Family Legacy Session with the Black Family Photo Album.
My name is Colette Stevens Zayas. I am 66 years old. I was born in New York City, New York.
My name is Yvette Stevens Broadhead. I am 68 years old and I was born in New York City. We're sisters. I'm the middle child.
And I'm the youngest.
Well, we have one more sister. Her name is Denise Stevens Tunst. She lives in Richmond, Virginia. She is 72 years old.
I think this is Colette. And this is Yvette. Wow. And the other one is in Virginia.
We were born to Perreppa Stevens and Linwood Stevens. My father's deceased.
Linwood's birth date is March 17th, 1919. My mother is Perreppa Stevens. Well, Franklin was her maiden name. And she was born March 27th, 1922. And they were both born in Gordonsville, Virginia.
Both families knew each other.
My grandmother's family and my father's family.
There's 11 siblings in my father's family and 5 in my mother's. So all of the siblings knew each other, just like another family in the neighborhood. So that's how they met.
A lot of my father's siblings were around my grandmother's age, and some were around my mother's age, like my father.
Well, one story my mother does tell, she was one day swimming in a lake or a pond, and she almost drowned, and my father saved her life. I think that was really like the beginning of their courtship. He was in the service at that time because he served in the Army. So that's really when they started seeing each other at that time and when he came out of the service.
He served in World War II. He would talk about the fighting.
He said many nights how they had to sleep in trenches and ditches night after night, which actually attributed to he had arthritis very bad. The doctors believe too that sleeping in ditches night after night and cold and wet and damp attributed to him having arthritis very bad.
My father was very quiet, easygoing,
very mild manner.
My mother was the disciplinary and the person that nobody messed with. Yeah. But my father was very, very easygoing, very calm. Nothing bothered him.
Actually, I see a lot of my father in my son. My son has that same temperament. And many times I could see a glimpse of my father in him and I'll say, you just reminded me of my father. Very mild, easygoing, laid back, don't bother nobody.
And that's it, that's my husband. That's my husband.
Your daughter said he was very laid back. Laid back.
Yeah.
They said out of the two parents, he was the laid back one.
Yeah, he was.
When my mother and him migrated to New York City, because at that time it was the Great Migration, so a lot of families were leaving and migrating to the north. But when they got married, my father moved to New York City because a lot of his sisters had already migrated to New York City. So when my mother and father got married, they moved to New York City. And they lived with one of his older sisters until they got on their feet. They moved to Harlem, and my father opened up his own mechanic business, 145th Street, Harlem. So that's where they lived. And then had my oldest sister in Harlem. She was born in Harlem. And then they moved to the Bronx. We were born in Manhattan, but after that, we were raised in Bronx, New York City. My mother was very, very close with her sisters. She's very close with Alfreda Watkins and Constance Edwards. So because they were so close, that made the cousins close. In the summertime, my grandmother took care of all 8 of us for 2 months in Virginia. So when school was out, I think the next day we were put on the train to go to Virginia. And we stayed in Virginia until school started. They got us out of Philadelphia streets and they got us out of the New York City streets. And we were in the country.
With no bathroom and no tub, and that's what we did the whole summer. We made our own fun. You know, my grandmother had what do you call it?
A tin tub.
We had a tin tub in the kitchen, and that's how we took our bath from well water. All of us in one tub.
And an outhouse,
water.
right?
We had an outhouse, but we never used the outhouse. We were in the woods.
But eventually she got inside plumbing.
My grandmother had a slop jar in the house for at nighttime. You know those porcelain slop jars for us for at nighttime. But that's what we did in the summer. We made our own fun.
So how many of it was y'all down?
8 of us.
8 in the summertime.
And sometimes 10. My mother's cousin, first cousin, Lois, would send her son. And he brought a friend. So sometimes she had 10. But not only that, my grandmother worked. As we got older, the older ones took care of the younger ones.
You know, that was a mess.
And no, it wasn't a mess because we knew. Now, every morning before my grandmother left for work, we had Bible study first. Every morning we had Bible study and then we ate our breakfast. And then she went off to work. And no, we knew to behave because my grandmother did not play with us. And the younger ones took care, the older ones, which was, it was 4 of them, took care of the younger ones. And we knew just, at one point before we got to that age though, she had a babysitter come in. And it was a friend of hers, her name was Emma. Emma never had kids. And this is before the older ones reached teenagers. And she would come in and she would watch us. And it was no problems. And we made our fun. We were very close as cousins. Very. We fought and made up the same day. But I can see how things, generations now it's changing. Not just ours, I'm saying the dynamics of the family have really changed over the years. What we had, you don't see that. Well, I'm not going to say it's everybody, but you see it declining.
We would all take turns on like the holidays. Like my mom would have Thanksgiving one time, I would have Christmas, or my aunts would have Thanksgiving, but we were always together for the holidays, one way or the other. Right. Yeah. Or any function. We call everybody. Right. In the family.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Happy birthday. Happy birthday. All right.
Don't forget me. Nobody is never gonna forgive you. Who is it?
I'm not sure. You
Who
tell
is
me.
it?
You want pizza?
That's me.
That's you
Yeah,
in the middle.
That's me. I don't know who this is.
I don't know what it is.
It's it. It's either my sister.
Which sister is it?
Our mother.
It's 5 of them. My mother's the oldest. So my grandmother closed up the house in Gordonsville, Virginia, and they moved to Philadelphia. It was the Great Migration. My mother was about 16 when they moved. She had another sister right underneath her, Beulah, but Beulah died at 12 years old. At that time, rheumatic fever ran high in those days. Actually, today they call it AFib. And then under her is her brother. There's only one brother, Charles, and then 2 other sisters, Alfreda and Constance. So they all were brought up in Philadelphia. From Philadelphia, when my father came out to service, his sisters migrated to Harlem and Long Island. His brothers stayed in the DC area. It's 11 of them. All of my father's brothers lived in DC. The sisters, 4 sisters, they moved to New York City. So my father went to New York City. So they lived in Harlem. And then eventually they moved to the Bronx, New York.
So, Mom, look at this one.
That's Cheetah.
That's your mom.
Yeah. No, that's Carol.
That's your mom. I was 6. No, I was 11.
Well, all that.
I was 11 years old on there, Mom.
Oh, one is 7.
No, I was less than 11.
It's 7 and 6.
I
Who
can't
is
count.
that?
Huh?
1 is 7.
7 and 6. I was 6 and Yvette was 7.
Yeah.
And how old were you?
Too old.
We lived in the South Bronx, which you could have heard of Fort Apache. When I look back on it, I loved it. It was always something going on.
All day long. Tons of street games in the Bronx. You know, just jump rope, hopscotch, slugs, handball, stickball. That's what we did all day long. Hydrants, because we didn't have a pool, you know, so 5 hydrants went on. We had day camp. We had tons of friends. We were always outside, but we have to be where my mother can see us from the window, okay? Or be in the house before it gets dark, of course. But we have fun in the Bronx.
Well, of course, you know, but in those days, that's what we did because there was no social media, all the things the kids have today to keep them in the house. We only had a television, one television coming up for the family. So we spent our time, all the families did, outside playing. We played all day long.
Summer, winter, we had 15 inches of snow. We were outside in the snow. We were outside, you know, and that's what we did. We didn't stay in the house and watch television. That one television that we had was black and white. But that's what we did. We had friends in the building. We in the 5-story tenement building, and we had tons of friends in the building. So if it was too cold to go outside or whatever, we were always up and down the stairs in each other's apartment.
It was only Afro-American and Hispanic in the neighborhood. I believe my mother told me when she first moved there were some Jewish people. That we don't remember because we were too young. But we only lived in the South Bronx, Fort Apache, until I was like 16, 17. And then we moved further up in the Bronx. It was a brand new development coming up where Freedom Land used to be actually. And it was right on the borderline of like going to Yonkers, New Rochelle, White Plains. And my parents moved in there brand new. It was like moving on up to the east side. It was called Co-op City. It's actually the largest development in the nation. It housed 60,000 people. We had 33 high-rise buildings. And all in between that was townhomes. And then there was 3 shopping centers within this Co-op City. The whole entire development was Jewish. They had to accept, I believe, a quota like maybe 25% of a mixture. So,
That's how we got in.
and that's where actually I met my husband. His family had moved there also. But my husband already lived in the North Bronx, but they lived in the projects. So his mother also moved there when it was brand new. And that's where my sister met her husband.
My name is Tony Zayas. I'm 74 years old, and I'm originally from Manhattan in New York. But I met Stevens in the Bronx when I purchased an apartment up in Co-op City in the Bronx. I was a 21-year-old married person with 1 son at that age. I purchased an apartment in Co-op City. That's how I met them, in Co-op. Oh, the Stevens family. I used to take my son to a basketball court, and I used to see the 2 Steven girls always walking by. And we all became friends. We were friends for years. I had gotten a divorce, and that's how I met Colette. I had knew Colette from before.
But the divorce before me.
Oh, I was divorced. And then started running around with Colette. And, that's how I met the Stevens.
Oh, Wait a minute.
I was always impressed by her mom. Her mom was always really a great cook, a wonderful person. And then my mother-in-law, Miss Stevens, she used to go to church on Sundays, and I used to take care of her husband. I used to sit with him, you know. He used to like football. He loved sports. So it was right up my alley. So I used to hang out with him and watch all the football games. So I really didn't care what time they got back from church. So we used to just sit and watch all the games together. So I'm a carpenter by trade. I'm a union carpenter. I put up high rises in New York. So I used to always do a lot of little things for her in her apartment, stuff like that. But when he passed away, for some reason I got even closer to him. And then when Tony got back from the Air Force, my brother-in-law that's married to Yvette, they moved to South Jersey, and they purchased a home, and we started looking for a home. That's how we ended up staying up there.
We loved it because just going through where we used to live, we lived in a apartment building with 5 floors and no elevators. But the 5 floors now is 10 flights of stairs. So it's 2 flights to a landing.
To a landing, yeah.
So if you can imagine, which I usually tell my grandkids and my kids, imagine having to bring everything you had to do, bringing the trash down. You had to come down 10 flights of stairs. Plus you had to go, once you came down the 10 flights of stairs, go down to the basement.
Yeah.
And then come back upstairs. Imagine that.
Food shopping.
Which it meant nothing to us at that time. Maybe to my mother it did, because we were young, you know, going up and down. And you can't miss what you never had. If you never had an elevator, you can't miss it. So that's all we knew. And we didn't have air conditioning.
And no heat sometimes.
So we didn't have air conditioning. So on a really, really, really hot nights, I can remember my mother and father opening up the windows, and we had a fire escape out there. But at that time, nobody bothered you. You know, we go open up the windows during the night while we slept. And then in the winter, there were times we didn't have heat. So that was hard. And then there were times we had roaches and mice. And I can remember my mother cutting on the oven sometime for us to have heat. So when we moved to Co-op City, it was like moving for me, it was like moving to heaven.
Central air.
So now we have central heat, central air, and this was in every single room. Yeah. And you could
elevators.
We had elevators, hardwood floors, big rooms.
With a bathroom and a half.
We loved it. It was one of the best times of our lives.
This is Virginia, and oh, she a beautiful house. She a beautiful house. She did.
You said that's Lucy, right?
And that's her husband.
What's her husband's name?
I forgot his
I don't
name.
know.
I didn't think he was too nice to her.
Developed, we would ask for doubles. Because we might want to give it to a family member. That's a nice one to name up.